Hello everyone, this is part 27 of What If Naruto Had a Secret, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Naruto woke up with a throbbing in his temples and a slight stiffness in his left arm, most likely from where he had been sleeping on it. Grunting, the blonde rolled onto his back, staring up at the dingy ceiling. He couldn't quite remember everything, but he knew that he was alive and hence apparently in friendly territory. Scowling, Naruto flashed back to the fight against that Isaribi guy. He had the impression that not too much time had passed between then and now, but rather than start jumping about he instead thought of the fight. It had, in all honesty, not been one of his better fights. Hell, he had only just barely managed to keep from being K, and it had taken a random jutsu to drive the man off. Who the hell was that Isaribi? Who were the Kiri no Shinobugatana Nanan and Shu? Why had that guy backed off after Naruto used the Rasengan, when before that he had been so excited every time Naruto counted him? Shaking his head, a bad idea, Naruto sat up to take in the room. Obviously it wasn't the most lavish of places, but wasn't meager, more comfortable than anything. Still, he was slightly worried about the lack of signs of his team, which instantly put him on his guard. He was just contemplating his lack of weapons when the door opened and an oblivious Yamanaka Ino entered carrying a tray with 2 steaming bowls. The scent, however, made his mouth water. It was unbelievable. She had miso ramen. Gah! Ino shouted, nearly upsetting the tray before steadying it and glaring at him. Geez, don't scare me like that, Naruto-kun. Ah, sorry Ino-chan. Naruto offered, scratching the back of his head. Ino paused, stared at him and then blinked. Naruto, sensing the sudden change, watched as the girl knelt and set her tray aside. She stared at him for a few more minutes, then carefully reached out to poke his forehead. You're awake. Well yeah, Naruto said, blinking. I mean sure, I took some of those stupid but I heal fast, remember. I know, but, well, Tsunade-Basan said that the weapon might have been poisoned, Ino explained, looking more relieved by the minute. I was worried you would in your sleep. Bah, I gotta be Hokage before I'll Naruto said, flashing her a smile before blinking. So where is Shino and Baba? Oi. Plus, where the hell are we? Edyoto. No, we're in Otofuku guy. Shino and Tsunade-Basan are delivering the money for her gambling debts, Ino said, shaking her head and picking up a bowl, handed it to him along with chopsticks. I'm supposed to stay behind and keep an eye on you. Tsunade-Basan isn't very happy with any of us, especially me. Wah? Naruto asked, eyes wide, ramen falling back into the bowl. Why not? We kept the bastard from taking the money. You got hurt, and we couldn't do anything. Especially me, Ino said with a shrug. We let our teammate nearly get K, when if we were just a little bit stronger he wouldn't have had to fight alone. That's stupid, Naruto said with a scowl. That guy was crazy strong. No, she's right, Ino admitted morosely, picking at her ramen. I was never meant to be a combat type. Infiltration and information is my specialty. Yeah, but we didn't have a chance for that, Naruto argued back, glaring at her. There were 3 of them and we each had to fight one. Naruto-kun, I appreciate what you're saying to do, but I couldn't get close to him. I shouldn't have been placed on this mission. Without my sword I'm mostly useless. So, learn how to fight without your sword, Naruto said, unable to believe this was the Ino from the academy. That Ino had always been sure of things, confident in her abilities and talent. This one seemed to doubt the usefulness she served on this time in a fight. Oi. If you want I can show you a ninjutsu Anko taught me. What good would that do? Ino asked blankly. Well, it's called the Kanashibari no Jutsu, Naruto explained, excitement creeping into his voice as the idea he had took shape. It freezes a person in their tracks, and I think, if you concentrate hard enough you can use it stop someone's heart. I haven't tried it yet, but you cold give it a shot. Quote. Ino blinked, then set her meal down. Naruto-kun, I appreciate the thought, but I'm not sure I could learn that. Oh come on, Naruto said, brushing her protest off before stuffing ramen into his mouth. Abba lunch okay? When she nodded he focused entirely on his meal. trying to remember all the details he could about the technique. After the first few times of using it, Naruto had gotten to the point where it was pure instinct like all his techniques now. Still he could vaguely remember the details and he'd make up the rest as he went. Turning back to his meal he grinned at her, slurping his ramen up as she rolled her eyes and began eating as well. So what's Otofuku guy like? Naruto asked after a moment, stirring his broth absently. Well, it's nowhere near the size of Edyoto and the biggest industry seems to be gambling and the pleasure district. Ino explained darkly, arching an eyebrow at him. Speaking of Edyoto, why were you so tense there? Naruto managed, then silently considered how best to answer that question. Well, she was his teammate, so maybe he needed to tell her. Considering it, he shook his head and met her gaze. Later, when Shino's here. Okay. Ino relented, though she studied him intently for several long moments before sighing. So, how are you going to teach me this ninjutsu? Oh. Naruto said, perking up happily. We'll go up to the roof and I'll create some cage bunshin for you to practice on. Well, after I restock my weapons. Shino thought about that, Ino said, pointing at a nearby pouch, full of fresh kunai, exploding notes, caltrops, and shuriken. We all restocked, though Abasan said it was a waste of resources. Ah, thanks, Naruto said, grabbing the pouch, then eyed his jacket, resigned that he would have to patch it. Springing up he grinned down at her, stretching. Well, let's get this show on the road. 10 minutes later, both ninja were standing on the rooftop, the sun setting on the far edge of the city. Naruto stretched yet again and then created 2 cage bunshin, who smiled brightly at Ino. The real Naruto walked away, then turned back facing Ino and the 2 cage bunshin. Right, so for now just watch K. Then at Ino's nod, one of the cage bunshin charged him, a kunai coming up, plunging toward his face. Without moving or flinch, Naruto struck with the kanashibari, freezing the attacking cage bunshin in place, the kunai an inch from his face. Stepping away, he grinned at a startled Ino. See, he'll be frozen in this position for 5 minutes. Anyway, the secret, you sorta project your chakra at the target. I do what? Well, Naruto mused, rubbing his chin thoughtfully, you mold your chakra, and then you throw it at the target. Kinda like a spear or kunai, anyway you throw it at the arms and legs or that sort of thing. Right, Ino drawled dubiously, then faced her own cage bunshin who started jumping up and down and waving his arms. Naruto felt the surge of chakra, then felt it scatter and shook his head. Ino, scowling, tried again only to have the same result. 20 minutes later, she still had no luck and an hour later was the same story. I can't do this, Ino huffed, crossing her arms and glaring at a bored Naruto who was busy practicing with his kunai and the second cage bunshin. Maybe we're doing this wrong, the Naruto cage bunshin offered, dodging a throw from the real Naruto. Probably, the real Naruto admitted, turning to match her stare for stare. He really wasn't sure why she wasn't getting it, just that her chakra would build and then scatter when she tried to hurl it. Scowling, he thought about it for several long minutes before realizing that her problem resembled his with the Rasengan, and then a devious thought came to mind. Naruto-kun, why are you smiling like that? Ino asked, her tone worried, and then yelped as the 2 Naruto clones suddenly attacked her with kunai. Ino backpedaled, instinctively going for her sword only to remember she had left it and her weapons behind at Naruto's prompting. Dodging the first lunge and shoving that Naruto away, she glared at the now laughing real Naruto. I'm going to K you. Not if they get you first. Naruto laughed, nodding at the cage bunshin who were now attacking in unison. They moved in sync, weaving back and forth in front of each other before one lunged, blade gleaming in the moonlight. Ino stepped to the side, the kunai coming within inches of her side, and dropped an elbow on its head. She was caught flat-footed, however, as the second one used the first one as a springboard and caught her in the mouth with a kick. Tumbling backward from the blow, Ino regained her feet, eyes wide as the 2 Narutos charged her yet again. This time Ino went on the offensive, landing a kick to the first one's face, followed by a punch at the other. Only this time the second clone grabbed her arm and swung her around, throwing her to the ground. Ino sprang up easily, panting, and then she felt the K intent. It was frightening and it was directed at her. She was nearly impaled by a kunai that was flying at her head, but she managed to grab the weapon and nail its user with another throw. The cage bunshin disappeared in a puff of smoke and the K intent doubled, making Ino collapse on her in fright. A second later the other cage bunshin came charging through the smoke, and jumped, hurling weapons down at her. Ino nimble rolled and dodged each blade, though they came closer and closer, until she regained her feet. Landing the Naruto didn't waste the energy to recenter himself and instead shot toward her at full speed, a kunai swinging back for an overhand S. Ino panicked, this one wasn't playing and it was moving too fast for her to counter or avoid. Gathering her chakra, the details of Naruto's face are clear, she focused everything she had into the blow and projected as big a chakra dagger as she could. The Naruto in question suddenly jerked back from the blow, kunai dropping from his hand and then with a loud pop, disappeared. Ino of course collapsed to her knees, hands on the rooftop, gasping for air. The adrenaline rush was intense, but as it subsided, she felt her shoulders shaking as the image of shock and surprise on Naruto's face replayed through her mind. Logically she knew it had been a cage bunshin, nothing more and nothing less, but it had been so real at the time. The intent, her desire to live, the fact that it was Naruto. When she felt a hand on her shoulder she jerked, and looked up to find him crouching next to her. His eyes were apologetic, but there seemed to be a look of pride on his face. Ino, however, did the only thing she could do, and s the taste out of his mouth, knocking him on his A. Ow, you bastard, Ino shouted, glaring at him, do you realize what that was like? I'll never get that image out of my head now. Oi. But Ino-chan, you did it, Naruto said getting up, rubbing his cheek, you used the Kanashibari no Jutsu and beat my cage bunshin in one shot. I don't care, Ino shouted at him, standing as well. Ino-chan, it was just a Naruto, Ino said sharply, fixing him with a glare that made him pause, I saw you IKU. Excuse me if I'm not jumping around for joy that I learned a ninjutsu at the expense of having the memory of your face at the moment of death engraved into my memory. Quote. Naruto blinked, opened his mouth and then fell silent. Somehow, he instinctively knew better than to admit that he had actually felt some of the pain his cage bunshin had felt. Still, he needed to say something, but he didn't know what her problem was now. I just thought, your problem was concentration, so if I had attack you for real that you'd solve it. Ino paused and looked away, just leave me alone. Ino-chan, Naruto said and then feeling her annoyance, frowned before doing as she asked. Slipping quietly into the inn, Shino nodded briefly at the man behind the desk then started up the stairs. After the last few hours with Tsunade, running all over the city to pay off her debts, he was more than ready to rest. Unless Ino was tending to a still unconscious Naruto, in that case he would have to resign himself to another rant. Ino apparently took Tsunade's disdain for their skill hard. Which was understandable, Ino had been idolizing her great-aunt for a while now. Shino on the other hand accepted that Tsunade had an unbelievably high standard, which was unsurprising considering her history. Shino also knew that while both he and Ino had not performed up to standards expected for combat, they were making steady progress. Both of them had originally been information-gathering type ninja and they remained geared toward that. Only Naruto was predisposed toward combat and had been trained in that way. So when Tsunade had let her disdain for his fighting skills be through, he ignored her and calmly pointed out what his purpose was supposed to be on the team. Gathering information first, combat second, and his priorities would not change. Tsunade took this with a curt nod and a muttered comment about people knowing their strengths. Shaking his head, Shino entered the room and paused, finding a conscious Naruto sitting on the futon and patching his jacket. More interesting was the fact that he was alone. Shino had been sure Ino would be present in this situation. Putting that aside, Shino entered the room completely and closing the door moved to his own futon. Oi, you and Baba have fun? Naruto asked, not looking up from his efforts at repairing the tattered jacket. Fun would not be the term to use, Shino responded. We meet with several individuals and paid off her massive gambling debts. I, however, learned much about her personality in this city. Naruto grunted at this, which was rather unusual, but didn't look up from his efforts. Shino watched the boy intently, eyebrows drawing together in thought before finally speaking. Has something occurred? Huh? Naruto asked, looking up. Then realizing what Shino asked, shook his head. Nah, just trying to patch my jacket up. I see. Shino said, frowning behind the high collar of his jacket, and Ino. Out. Is she aware that you are awake? Shino asked, almost scowling though it went unseen. Well yeah, Naruto said, shrugging as he went back to work on his jacket. We trained together for a bit after I got up and then she asked me to leave her alone, so I did. Why did she ask for you to leave? I know, Naruto said with a shrug. I was teaching her the Kanashibari no Jutsu, but she was having a hard time with it, so I had my Kage Bunshin attack her. After she used it to K1, Ino-chan freaked out on me. That is odd, Shino said. Did you say something inappropriate? No, Naruto said, forcefully looking up at him. All I did was help her out, then she's freaking out about seeing the face of my Kage Bunshin when it's. That does seem a tad unreasonable, Shino agreed. Did you apologize? Sometimes it is best to apologize, even if he did nothing wrong. I tried, but she just kept shouting about the Kage Bunshin, then she demanded I leave her alone, so I did. I failed to see why she is upset then. Shino said, shaking his head, scowling in thought about why Ino would react in such a way to a perfectly normal way of training. Oi, I know why, Naruto said darkly, turning back to his jacket, 'cause she's a girl and girls are crazy. For once, I agree with your decision. Ino couldn't help but pace restlessly on the small rooftop where Naruto had left her. How could have done that to her? Didn't he understand what it was like to see a friend's face at the moment of death? Ino had seen it and it haunted her, made her wish that it could be erased from her memory, but even Yamanaka techniques couldn't accomplish that. Fisting her forehead, she grumbled softly, then sat down heavily on the edge of the roof. It was partial her fault though. If she had just been able to concentrate, he wouldn't have tried to help her like that. It wasn't that Ino hadn't tried, it was just that Tsunade's doubt in her skill made it impossible for her to concentrate on anything. Snorting in annoyance, the young woman propped her chin in her hands and stared out over the city. At first, when she had been given this mission, Ino had been excited because she would be traveling with her aunt, the famous medical Sanin. It was a dream come true for Ino, and the blonde had wondered what, if anything, she could talk her aunt into teaching her. Then that had fallen through, after she had went against the man with the Naginator. She had lost, and nearly got her team annihilated. Shino tried to explain that because they were originally information gathering types and hence were making up for lost time at combat. Ino knew the truth though, they were pathetic. Naruto did all the fighting, the Kumo-iki, Akagahara, the Chunin exams, Gaara, and that wasn't even counting the fact that he had held off Orochimaru of the Sanin for a few minutes utterly alone. Just what good did she do for this team? Hell, what good was her knowing Kenjutsu? Who had she ever fought and defeated? Ino was tempted to give up on the Kenjutsu, it would easy, but her pride wouldn't let her. She had worked hard, harder than she ever had, to gain the abilities she now had. Then there was honoring her sensei's memory. He had entrusted her with continuing his Kenjutsu style. No, she couldn't give up, but it still didn't mean she was any good. Ino need to work harder, much harder, to prove that she wasn't useless. Maybe, if she asked very nicely, Tsunade might agree at least to teach her a basic medical jutsu. Yawning, the Kunoichi started to get up. She needed to talk to Naruto. He wasn't exactly big on understanding other people's emotions. Plus, if nothing else, Naruto could and would at least teach her another useful move. A moment later, however, there was an almost unnoticeable spike of chakra and Ino rolled backward out of instinct. Coming up in a crouch out of view of the street below her, Ino added to her balance with a hand on the rooftop before her. Edging her way forward, Ino cautiously peered over the edge of the rooftop down to the street. There was her aunt, who was half turned, facing someone who was partially in the shadows. Ino squinted slightly in the gloom, trying to make out more details. Whoever they were, they appeared to be wearing Hakama pants and a dark long-sleeved top. More telling, of course, was the white mask that so resembled the Anbu masks that she had seen. Obviously, whoever this was, they were highly talented and determined to keep their Idini secret. Tsunade-sama, the figure said, their voice just barely reaching Ino. Who the hell are you? Tsunade returned, a tad louder, though Ino still had to strain her hearing and control her breathing. Sadly, the wind shifted, making it impossible to hear for the moment. A second later, the wind and Ino felt her mouth compress into a thin line at what she heard. As a sign of faith, we have removed those who would dishonor you by demanding money and wounding your comrades. If you decide to help us in our cause, then we shall help you as it is needed. If you decline, then we lose a vaunted ally. The phrasing was so odd. The message, of course, was clear, but who exactly were they? Why were they approaching Sunad of all people and like this, in secret? It just didn't make any sense. Still, Ino forced the message to the back of her mind, focusing on the conversation. Sunad was saying something, what Ino couldn't tell since the wind had kicked up and was now carrying the words away from her once more. The figure responded softly with something that sounded like, very well, but she couldn't swear to it. Then her eyes, trained to detect high-speed movement, saw the figure dart away into the night. Ino waited another moment, then quietly slipped away, needing to discuss this with her two teammates. Sunad was in a foul mood when she finally entered the inn, mainly because she had been denied access to her favorite gambling centers because of her debt. Then she'd been forced to deal with a fool that assumed she was a working girl. He'd recover in a few months, so she didn't feel too bad. Then, after a night of drinking and sourly thinking about the three she was traveling with, a mysterious person had approached her. They had dressed like an old-style Anbu, though the face mask reminded her more of a mist hunter nin. They were slight, and though they were talented, obviously only Chunin level. Sunad guessed, it was more manner of speech than anything, that they had been a young male, maybe 14 or 15 years old. His message weighed heavily on her mind, though there were only a few key phrases that jumped out at her. Within Konoha, we lack unity, your aid in helping us to achieve this goal. If you decline, then we lose a vaunted ally. She had only heard of unity in passing upon her return, no real details, but this unsettled her. To make such an approach was not something anyone would have expected, plus there was the underlying threat implied in that last line. Sunad had of course declined the offer. She was a Sannin and she wasn't afraid. Besides, if they did move against her, she could potentially gain more information. Whoever they sent would be strong, though they would most likely underestimate her as most male ninja did, but by fighting him she would be able to figure out who he really was. Of course that was a large gamble considering the handicaps she was under, an overrated team and her fear of B. Dried B she could handle. If she was truly enraged enough she could even handle fresh B, provided she didn't notice it getting on her. Still, the S was cast and she would handle things as they fell. Staring up the stairs, she was left with only one real problem, Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto, who had set her into this position because of his sheer desire and determination to be Hokage, had so forcibly reminded Sunad of her important people. Naruto, the son of the Yondaime Hokage who she had encouraged to take the job, who also happened to be a Jinchuriki. Sunad still couldn't believe it, after all of the Yondaime's speeches about how immoral and wrong it was to condemn children to such a fate, his violent reaction to hearing that Suna had created one, that he would in turn make his own. Obviously it was the Kyuubi no Yoko that Naruto held in check, that granted him that onijutsu of regeneration. Sunad wasn't even sure what she could do or say. Who else knew? Jiraiya would obviously know, perhaps Anko, but not his teammates. Sunad felt that even Naruto might have only recently learned of his status. Should she bring it up with him? But the discussion would lead into dangerous territory about the nature of Jinchuriki and how they were treated. Shaking her head, Sunad resolved to leave the matter alone for the moment. She would talk with Jiraiya first. Reaching the hallway, she came to a stop, spotting the boy that had been occupying her thoughts leaning against the wall outside his room. He had those eyes fixed on her, and even in this dim hallway, Sunad knew he wouldn't miss anything she did. "You're up," Sunad said causally, walking to the door to her room. "We need to talk." "You know," Sunad drawled, eyeing the blonde in the dark hallway, "I think idiots who let their teammates get hurt should be seen and not heard." "We got hurt," Naruto countered in a tight voice, "because we were guarding your money barber." Quote. Sunad shook her head, not even willing to get worked up over such a comment. The boy was young, brash, and didn't know his from a hole in the ground, despite what people thought. "Who are the Kiri no Shinobugatana Nanan and Shu?" Naruto asked after a moment of silence, eyes almost glowing in the dim light of the hallway. "An elite group of mist swordsmen, Momoki Zabuza, Hoshigaki Kisame, Kurosuke Reiga, Yasushi Jisaribi, Uchijini Tenbatsu, Yamanhachi and Jaise Make. Each one is Jonin level and the 5 surviving members are A rank or higher missing ninja." Sunad answered with a sigh, crossing her arms and resigned to answering such pointless questions. "Okay." Naruto said slowly, eyeing Tsunade closely. Tell me about Isaribi. Is that the name of the one you guys F up against? Tsunade asked with a snort, then seeing Naruto's glare shook her head. He's called the Elegant Monster of the Mist, and he used to use a Dao, but changed to the Naginator. But that's not a sword. You know, I remember someone else saying that. They were the third candidate for the Yondaime Hokage, and the guy mentioned that Isaribi wasn't a swordsman since he used it. Isaribi flayed him like a fish. Huh, so if he's so strong, then why the hell are you giving us a hard time? Naruto asked curtly and a tad forcefully. If he can fill it a Hokage candidate, I think two Chunin and a Genin driving him off is a big deal. First off, Tsunade said, glaring at him, he was not actively seeking to KU3. Second, you were the only one that drove him away, the others lost to his Mizu Bunshin who are 1/10 of his strength. In other words, they were pushovers, but that doesn't matter since he will be focusing on you from now on. He mentioned we'd met again, Naruto said blandly. Met. Once he meets someone he can't K, he starts obsessing, he goes to any length to K them, and the longer he goes without K them, the worse he gets. Naruto exclaimed in surprise. Tsunade continued darkly, ignoring that outburst, and finally, when the Sannin were your age we could have K him easy. Well, we're not you, Naruto countered just as darkly, this is Team 10. I'll admit that it wasn't my best fight ever, but the next time I face him he won't walk away. You keep telling yourself that and maybe one day, it'll be true, Tsunade said, opening her door, glaring at him, but probably only after you've lost your whole team. Keep that in mind, little boy, a hero is only a hero because he's gotten everyone else K. Is that what you think, Barber? Naruto asked thickly, anger rich in his voice. So you're saying all those important people of yours got people K? You don't get it, Tsunade started angrily, before being off. Oi, I get things fine. Naruto shouted, his eyes narrowing, you're a cold-hearted, self-righteous b-hag. You think a hero gets everyone K? You think a Hokage is a joke? You're not only insulting me, but everyone you ever loved that dreamed of being Hokage. Tsunade almost recoiled from the hostility in his voice, the sheer loathing in his tone. Of course she wanted to would object, but for a moment she felt as if Dan and Nawaki were shouting at her. Calling her those names, telling her the same thing as Naruto was shouting. Recovering, Tsunade prepared to shout back but found the hallway empty, just her and the cursed necklace she wore. It felt like a boulder around her and reaching up the Sannin clutched it tightly. After a moment's deliberation she pulled it off, crying, realizing that it was not hers to wear. Naruto had shown just how deeply being Hokage meant to him, his spirit echoing too loudly of Dan and her younger brother. This would be the last time she entrusted this necklace to anyone, when then the necklace went with him. Tsunade would not be able to bear the weight of the curse after that. Turning, she opened the door and stepped inside. By the morning she would have recovered her veneer of disdain. As she lay on her futon that night, she cried for her lost family. Naruto landed adroitly on the rooftop, mind awash in the various pieces of information that he now possessed. Glancing around he noted that Shino was the only one present, but that he appeared absorbed with his bugs. That meant Shino had found something and Ino had gone to investigate, giving Naruto a moment to think about what he had learned. Sitting down on the rooftop, Naruto crossed his arms, scowling. He didn't really understand that hag's problem, who went around spouting about how a hero got others K. She was seriously F up in the head if she thought like that. A hero didn't get others K, he stopped others from being K. His scowl deepened as he thought more and more about that conversation. He had meant every word. Still, he couldn't help but wonder what was up with that hag. Shaking it off, he instead turned to the facts he had learned about the man that had attacked them yesterday, Yasushi Isaribi. Naruto felt almost excited at the thought of having such a person trying to K him. It proved Naruto was strong, but he could already see the downside. A man that got obsessed the longer he went without K his target. Oh yeah, that was a good thing for a future Hokage to have. There was no telling when that bastard would show back up. Still, at least now he knew how to at least help Ino accept her defeat. An A-rank missing ninja was not something any of them should be facing. Adding that, along with his own defeat, should at least help Ino get over the loss. Though he was still unclear as to why she had freaked out on him earlier during the Cage Bunshin training. Scowling even more, the Chunin thought long and hard about certain things she had said. I saw you IKU, the memory of your face at the moment of death. It was like a bolt of lightning struck him as he realized the problem. His Cage Bunshin had looked like him, so she was upset because of seeing his face as he. Obviously, Naruto realized eyes wide, Ino didn't like seeing him hurt. He remembered the forest of death, the concern she had shown for him being hurt after his fight against that snake bastard. Hadn't she said that he was more important than Sasuke, hence if she cared that much about him being hurt, seeing him would have to be horrible. He sat there, utterly surprised at such a concept. Then he tried to play it off, or talk it around so that he was just overthinking things, but no, it was obvious now. She considered him important enough that even seeing his Cage Bunshin was enough to upset her. I'm back, Ino suddenly said, and Naruto jerked, almost falling over at her silent arrival. Ino didn't seem to notice as she moved to sit down with them, her eyes hard. There was no hint of her normal attitude, which told him that whatever she had learned was serious. What did you learn? Shino asked, apparently rejoining the conversation. The boy's name is Haku, Ino said, he's working with someone named Zabuza. I didn't have much time since he started waking up as soon as I entered his mind, so I had to get out of there. Zabuza, Naruto repeated, mind flashing to the name Tsunade had told him. No, that would be too much of a coincidence, that would only happen with an author that just didn't care about being called uncreative. Yeah, Ino said with a slight nod. At least we now have names, Shino offered, before a soft buzz filled the air. Perhaps Ino should tell us once more of the message she overheard between Tsunade-sama and this Haku. As a sign of faith we have removed those who would dishonor you by demanding money and wounding your comrades. If you decide to help us in our cause then we shall help you as it is needed, if you decline then we lose a vaunted ally. Oi, is that everything? Naruto asked, frowning slightly. That's all I could hear, Ino admitted with a frown, which isn't much, but still. Obviously the meeting is strange, Shino allowed, nodding slightly, that last line is obviously a threat on her life. Huh, you sure? Naruto asked, glancing at the boy curiously. Considering the nature of the message and the timing of the meeting, yes. Damn it, Naruto grumbled before looking at Ino. Okay, so what about the messenger himself, what he'd look like? I couldn't see much, and obviously I didn't get too close when I entered his mind, but he looked a lot like the Anbu. Naruto whispered, eyes widening. Admittedly, he was not the most brilliant of people, but he could connect the dots. An Anbu, meeting Tsunade alone, making that kind of offer. It screamed unity. What is it? Ino asked startled, blinking. Unity, Naruto said glancing between them. Then seeing the lack of response explained, it started just before our Chunin exams. The daimyo was making a state visit of the country, and he was hanging out in Edyoto where this group called Unity tried to him. So that's why you were so alert in Edyoto, Shino said. Yeah, so anyway, Unity is made up of mostly Anbu, with some normal Jonin. Other than that, the only thing I know about them is that they recognize each other by a hand sign. What hand sign? A basic variation on the, altogether, sign, Naruto supplied, demonstrating briefly, quoting Anko exactly. Most hand signs are common sense, used in small squads. So, of course, Unity would use a common one, who would notice a slight variation. This isn't good, Ino said after a moment, chewing her fingernail, Anbu and Jonin. If Tsunade Basin turned them down and they really are going to try and K her, how are we supposed to stop them? We allow them ambush us, Shino answered, that is the best strategy, considering the various unknown factors. Quote. Say wa? Ino asked eyes wide. Shinobi Rule 59, Shino explained softly, a true shinobi can turn any ambush or trap against the one who initiated it. Ino said turning to Naruto, smirking, so what's the plan? Naruto crossed his arms, thinking deeply for several long minutes on the situation. Those guys were definitely going to be going after Tsunade, but she was a Sanin so she could probably handle it. However, knowing what little he did of Anbu, her age, and the fact that she was related to Ino, it would be best not to risk her life. Okay, Naruto said finally, grinning, this is what we'll do. Haku watched in silence as the group, located in a small clearing just off the main road, finished their lunch and set out once more, the undercurrents obvious to his well-trained eye. The Aberrane was walking point, but obviously focusing inward too much. The target was walking with a glacial silence, glaring at the orange-clad boy who was bickering with the blonde girl wearing the sword. They were all oblivious to the shadow following them, preparing to see off their retreat when the ambush occurred. They were about 5 miles out from the city, and as predicted they were taking routes not normally traveled, where sources of water were far less plentiful. It was a shame they did not know that there had been an isolated storm ahead last night. Following silently, Haku felt disappointed by Tsunde's decision. She had a good heart and it was a shame they would have to kill her now. As a medic, Tsunde would have been invaluable to Konoha in the upcoming turmoil, and if it were up to him, Haku would try to reason with her. It wasn't up to him though, so it would be a shame when Zabuza killed her, but she really had left them with no other choice. Sensing something moving swiftly at him from ahead, Haku dropped back and then dodged further out of range to avoid a swarm of bugs on patrol. Apparently, the Aberrane wasn't quite as inattentive as he had first thought. Still, the bugs retreated and Haku moved back into better position. Glancing at the team, he smiled behind his mask, seeing the others sending silent, but obvious signals to each other. So they were suspicious. Good, they really were ninja then. Not that it would matter. Ahead he could see the marker Zabuza-sama had placed for him. The ambush would start in a few moments. Zabuza would attack from ahead and Haku would see off the retreat. They would be and Haku could continue helping Zabuza-sama. Readying his needles, the team came to a stop high in a tree and crouched on the tree branch. It would be any moment now, and he selected his target point for Tsunde and the blonde girl closet to her. He silently offered a prayer of remorse to the gods, and promised to end things peacefully for both of them. The veins in the N would be best, easiest to hit and the quickest to end things. Ino could feel her nerves screaming at her, accurately aware of the ninja that had been trailing them stopping. The jaws of the ambush were closing and it was taking all of her training to continuing acting normal. Ino just hoped that this plan wouldn't blow up in their faces. After all, it was counting a lot on their just being too ninja and their overconfidence. Still, it was Naruto and he came up with good plans. Though Ino in this case had doubts about the logic of this one, Ino would be responsible for handling Haku, while Naruto and Shino handled Zabuza. Even with Naruto's explanation about taking Tsunde's criticism with a grain of salt, since the guy they had fought was an A-rank missing ninja, having her famous aunt bad-mouthing her skills was not conducive to her confidence. Ino was jolted out of her thoughts as she felt Tsunde grab the back of her outfit and pull her back as a massive blade spiraled through the air. Ino watched the arc of the blade, surprised at speed it was traveling. Then, with a resounding thud, it sunk into a thick tree and a moment later a tall man, wearing only loose pants and heavy boots, landed on the handle. Zabuza. With a simple hop, he flipped backward, pulling the sword free as he descended. Landing he turned, the massive weapon coming around to rest casually across his bare shoulders, staring at them with cold eyes from over the bandages around the lower half of his face. Ino couldn't help but feel a tiny shiver as she realized this man was AK through and through. Tsunde, the man said in a cold, unrefined voice, "How nice to finally meet you. Oi, are you Momoki Zabuza, of the Kiri no Shinobugatana Nanan Shu?" Naruto asked, moving between the group to try and stare down the man. "Hey, well informed for a ninja wannabe, huh?" The K said, his attention shifting to Naruto. "By the way, that's a nice trick with the bunshin there." Naruto tensed, and Ino felt a wave of K intent from Naruto wash over her. The Kenjutsu user couldn't help but shiver. She hated the feeling it gave her around Naruto. Still, further thoughts were cast aside as a flurry of darts started toward her and Ino reacted without thinking. Her sword clearing the scabbard, deflecting them expertly, and then shifting her grip to a two-handed hold, Ino darted into the trees. The boy in question, wearing a mask with a stylized flame, moved back in response while throwing more 7 needles, but Ino's Kodaki gracefully deflected them. A moment later she reached the tree line and hurtled up the branches toward him. Now that she moving, in the thick of battle, there was no more doubt. Reaching the same branch as her attacker, she made a quick thrust at his mask but he dodged back, a kunai appearing in hand. Following nimbly, Ino gave chase driving him back, her Kodaki scraping against the kunai repeatedly. Then suddenly Haku stopped retreating and went on the offensive. Ino brought her Kodaki around knocking his attack aside. It was a testimony to the skill of both when they spun in unison on the branch and came back around for another exchange. Ino lunged forward, blade aimed at his stomach, but had it deflected to the side. Haku followed that up by making his own S at her face, forcing Ino to bend back, allowing the kunai to pass inches from her face. Regaining her proper posture, Ino whipped her sword around in an attempt to S the boy in half. Instead, Haku nimble jumped off the branch, rebounding off a series of branches heading for the ground. Cursing, Ino jumped off the branch, channeling chakra into her sword, reinforcing it as she brought it overhead. Haku reached the ground a second before her, and then looked up, raising his kunai to block her blow. Ino smirked and yelled, the kodaki beginning its downward arc. Haku seemed to realize the danger and dodged back at the last second, a shrill shearing noise followed by a deep rumble filling the air. Standing from her crouched position, Ino felt slightly lightheaded, but couldn't stop her grin. At her feet was a S in half kunai and a deep gouge from where her sword had bit into the ground. Looking up, she found the masked boy standing perfectly still, his attention focused on her completely. Slowly, carefully, he produced a new kunai, head tilting slightly as if giving her serious thought. That was when Ino felt the first rush of excitement. Someone was finally taking her as a serious threat. Somebody was afraid of her, Yamanaka Ino. Slipping her left foot back, settling her weight evenly, she raised her kodaki edge up, along the side of her cheek. A brief surge of chakra to her legs, she shot forward, a sharp thrust toward Haku's mask. The kunai came up, scraping against the blade, before locking against the handguard and blade. Dropping her weight slightly, Ino shoved him back, eyes narrowing in concentration. Haku darted forward, a rapid series of exchanges in a matter of moments, leaving Ino almost overwhelmed. Was it her, or was the guy getting faster? Lunging for his stomach, the boy managed to sidestep her blade and counter with a kick to her right knee. Ino went with the momentum and rolled to her feet, before twisting around, her kodaki deflecting the kunai. Regaining her feet, slipping her left foot back and holding the blade angled toward this solar plexus, Ino waited for his next move. Haku was fast as Sasuke easily, maybe even faster. The boy darted forward once more, another kunai in hand, but Ino deflected the weapon aside and then down, before side-kicking him in the head. Haku flipped back from the blow, but managed to plant a hand on the ground and flip around to rebound off a tree and land in crouching stance. Ino almost growled in frustration, this was getting nowhere fast. He had her beat in speed, but her skill neutralized it, a standoff. Then Haku shot forward, two kunai in hand this time. Ino pulled her kodaki around quickly, S at his midsection, only to have him hook his right blade under hers while spinning to his right. The obvious thing, if Ino had been weaker or undertrained, would be for her release the weapon. Instead, she spun with the momentum, the kodaki escaping the kunai, allowing her to spin around and catch his free wrist. Her kodaki coming back around, Ino prepared to make an attack but had to dodge back as the second kunai came back toward her ribs. A few simply acrobatics moved her out of the path of the two kunai as they came at her, before skidding to a halt. Looking up, Ino stared at her opponent, surprised to find him breathing heavy. A rush of pride flooded through her, she was handling this, she was equal to an Anbu. Then it was shattered when the boy spoke. You are very talented, however, I am afraid you are unable to defeat me. Ha, Ino asked, a sense of dread filling her. It rained in this area last night. Haku said calmly before flashing through a series of one-handed seals. Moments later, a hail of razor-sharp needles made of water assaulted Ino, prompting her to channel chakra along her blade and unleash a tornado to scatter the needles. The boy was undaunted, however, as he began forming more one-handed seals. Even more water took to the air, taking the shape of several large mirrors as they surrounded Ino. Eyes wide, Ino felt her dread growing. This was not a good development. Then, much to her growing distaste, the ninja stepped backward, melting into a mirror. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Dodging the massive sword, Shino found himself in the hands of a cage bunshin who tossed him into the air. Flipping, Shino sailed clear of Zabuza and his weapon, before landing heavily in front of a Mizu bunshin of Zabuza. Thankfully, he managed to create a spear of his bugs and send it through the man's head, creating a spray of water, and thus reducing the number of Zabuzas down to 1. Turning, the Aburame spotted Naruto and his few remaining cage bunshin trying to hurt the man. After Ino had taken off after Haku, things had degenerated. First, it had been semi-even, between himself and Naruto. They'd been pushing Zabuza, And then the man had created those Mizu Bunshin, which thankfully had been weaker than normal due to the lack of water. Still, the plan had fallen apart and Shino would be more hindrance than help in a direct assault on the sword-wielding ninja, not that Naruto seemed to care. The blonde was throwing all sorts of wind jutsu at the man, taijutsu combinations and even a few underhanded tricks. The sad truth was, that no matter how much Naruto tried, Zabuza always managed to scrap through with as little damage as possible. Suddenly Zabuza brought his sword around, the last few cage bunshin down and coming within inches of gutting Naruto, but Shino's bugs moved on their own and formed a Kikai bunshin to absorb the blow and allow Naruto to retreat. Maybe Shino couldn't actively help with the fight, but he could cover Naruto as best he could. As the orange-clad ninja regrouped and made yet more cage bunshin, Shino silently guided his Kikai to key locations on the man's body, replacing those already present. Shino had devised the tactic after the start of the fight in an attempt to drain as much of the man's chakra as he could. So far, the man had seemed unaware of the drain, but Shino had a limited amount of Kikai left unaffected from the exposure to the water. Zabuza seemed to be growing more agitated as Naruto and his clones resumed the fight, and with a sudden blur of movement, the clones disappeared in puffs of smoke and Naruto crashed to the ground at Shino's feet from a kick to the face. Shino, however, was eyeing the man who had struck a weird pose while glaring at them. It seemed to take a matter of seconds before the air was thick with a mist from nowhere. "Fan out!" Naruto shouted, leaping to his feet, his breathing abnormally loud in the sudden hush, betrailing from his mouth and scalp. "Eight choices," A.'s voice whispered from nowhere, while Shino strained to see. "Kidneys, heart, liver, lungs, spine, clavicle vein, end vein, brain." Shino frowned behind his high collar, wondering what he could do. His bugs wouldn't be able to notice anything in time and he couldn't dissipate the mist, it was laced too heavily with chakra. Even Naruto's wind would have a hard time, and he made a motion to the on-edge boy not to try what he was obviously thinking about. "You guys aren't bad," Zabuza taunted, still hidden in the mist, "but I'm the demon of the mist, expert in silent K. You're an eyebrow-less freak." Naruto shouted, heatedly, and hands coming together, unleashed a surprisingly strong blast of wind. It actually swirled the mist and forced it to part, at least within close vicinity of them. Shino spotted it first and grabbing Naruto yanked him down as Zabuza's massive sword through the space they had both just occupied, and then his world blurred, almost making him retch, as a shunshin carried them further away from the man. Coming out of it, he found Naruto kneeling next to him, and glaring. Looking at Zabuza, who sported little more than a few shallow sea, Shino realized just how matched they were. "You're fast, ain't you?" Zabuza said, sword coming to rest on his shoulder, "but I'm going to K you." "Hey!" Naruto shouted indignantly as he suddenly charged, 50 cage bunshin emerging from thin air and began throwing explosive kunai. "That's our plan." Ino knew when she had first seen Haku's trick with the mirrors to expect the worst. However, she still had no way of preparing for the assault that had followed. The numerous Hakus had lifted their hands, holding senbon needles, and suddenly the air was full flying weapons. They were moving at a speed that Ino could only register shadows of movement, and it took all of her skill to deflect the ones aimed at her vital points. That had been the pattern for the last few minutes, her continuously deflecting the needles, praying for a moment's break, wondering how in the hell this technique worked. Then suddenly there was a lull in the assault and the boy stared down at her from all sides, giving her the chance to attack. Ino took it and channeled the chakra along her sword, hurling a tornado toward the mirrors. Sadly, it failed to have the desired result. Her chakra was too low to do any damage to the mirrors, and she realized how stupid she had been for using so many powerful moves early in the fight. Her only option now was to figure out the secret to this jutsu and then K the boy. A hail of needles came at her from all sides, but Ino nimbly deflected them while watching the reflections in the mirrors, knowing Haku had to be changing mirrors rapidly since that was the only explanation. "Trying to follow me with your eyes, you will never be able to cope," the boy said from over the mirror overhead, while the numerous reflections lifted their senbon needles in sync. "How the hell are you moving so fast?" Ino shouted, deflecting the incoming attack, desperately seeking the chance to attack but not finding it. "This jutsu is unique to me," Haku admitted, pausing once more. "I use the mirror's reflection to travel. To me you appear to be moving in slow motion." Ino felt her breath hitch, her eyes widen. The way he had said that, unique to me, the way he described the move, it sounded like an advanced bloodline of some sort. Her hopes of overcoming it suddenly seemed to disappear, and then she noticed something. He was talking a lot more and the mirror she had attacked was still cracked. That raised a red flag in her mind, common sense suddenly screaming at her. With the small amount of water that would be available from the rain last night, he had to be using an ungodly amount of chakra to hold it all together. She could outlast him, if she did as Kakashi had taught her for the Chunin exams and relied on her sixth sense to survive. Still, Haku traveled at unbelievable speeds. He was actually attacking from all sides at once after all, and Ino was hard-pressed to defend herself. Not that Ino could or would give up, but the fact was she was helpless. Her chakra was low, her stamina was not enough to get her through this, and her blade was slowing just a little bit from fatigue. Deflecting a flurry of needles as best she could, Ino could feel the early signs of exhaustion setting in. He paused to talk again and Ino frantically applied her mind to the problem, desperate for a solution. The mirrors were obviously beyond her ability to destroy with her low chakra. Defending was getting her nowhere, except slowly. He moved too fast for her to disrupt his attack, but her only option was just that. K him while he attacked her, but the problem was how. Then she remembered the jutsu Naruto had taught her yesterday, a jutsu she had mastered by his cage bunshin with a massive heart attack. A jutsu forever linked to the look of surprise on his face as Kanashibari no jutsu was her only choice, but there was still one last problem, how to slow Haku down long enough to hit him with it. A moment later Shinobi Rule 58 flashed through her mind and Ino knew the answer. Victory sometimes comes through defeat. An unnatural calm stole through Ino, she knew how to win now, it was just a matter of keeping it from looking obvious. Dodging instead of deflecting the next hail of weapons, Ino made a lunge for the mirror the boy was in. It was serious gamble on her part, her reflexes against his accuracy and speed. The Senbon needle struck her to rights in the sea and she jackknifed from the blow to land spread eagle on the ground. There was a moment of silence and then sound of the mirrors cracking before they shattered. The sound of feet connecting with the ground filled the damp air. You never had a hope of defeating me. Your kenjutsu could not destroy my ice and you could not move fast enough to catch me. A second later, he jerked in surprise, his body folding from an unseen impact of chakra, while Ino had managed to sit up quickly. Breathing heavily, using an arm to support her, she watched as he stumbled back, before collapsing with a dull thump. Gathering her energy, Ino carefully regained her feet and stood stooped shoulder for a moment, then retrieved the kodaki she had dropped in that last attack. Pausing she straightened up, then grasping the senbon pulled it free with a soft grunt. Looking at the bee-covered needle, she tossed it aside, grimacing in pain as she sheathed her sword. Okay, so that was not the most brilliant idea she'd ever had, but at least she was alive. Thankfully, her reflexes had been better than his speed and accuracy, allowing her to twist her body just enough to avoid taking a serious hit, but from the feel of it, she'd see it awfully close. Even more thankfully, the bandages around her upper body had absorbed some of the blow. Feeling a moment of pride, she looked at now S-boy and grimaced, but still she was proud this had not been an easy fight for her. Still, Ino had to say it, because now that the fight for her life was over she couldn't help it. You talk too damn much like Sasuke, by the way. After another moment she turned, heading back toward the rest of her team. Naruto shot in, ducking the massive blade as it swept overhead, and spun around with a hammer fist toward the man's ribs. Sadly, it was like trying to fight Anko. This bastard could react faster than Naruto could attack. Zabuza stepped back and dropped his sword in a sharp chop. Naruto quickly threw himself into a left shoulder roll and sprang to his feet as two clones grabbed and threw him completely to safety. Landing he spun, the clones buying time as best they could. This fight was not going well and Naruto knew it, he should have been able to handle this. Instead, Zabuza was tearing him to shreds, slowly, and Naruto was beginning to doubt his own skill. He quickly banished that, after all, Zabuza while powerful was still taking some damage. It was just that in comparison Naruto was taking the worst of it all and that grated against the boy worse than anything and he was determined to change things. Raising his fingers, Naruto created a few hundred cage bunshin and sent them after they guy, who seemed to be growing more pissed off with each passing second. Glancing left, he spotted Shino who was silently guiding a wave of Kikai to attack the man from behind. Seeing his teammate, Naruto thought about Ino and wondered if she had managed to win against her enemy or not. Creating another cage bunshin, he sent it on its way to find out, his heart almost in his tea at the thought of her lying in the forest. No, not Ino and not on his watch. This fight ended now. Naruto returned to the fight with renewed vigor. It was sheer chaos, weaving and dancing his way through the cage bunshin, using them as cover and distraction. Explosive notes were going off right and left, massive amounts of exploding kunai and shuriken, and it all proved utterly pointless as Zabuza finally got a bead on him and swung that massive weapon around to take his head off, destroying several cage bunshin in the process. Naruto ducked under the blow, much to Zabuza's obvious confusion, then sa kunai across his stomach. The missing ninja grunted at that, lashing out, but Naruto dodged that as well and drove the kunai into the shoulder at an angle. Zabuza actually yowled in pain, but pivoted, catching Naruto alongside the head with a knee that sent him tumbling away. Face livid, Naruto regained his feet with a sway and turned dismayed that the man was the kunai out of his shoulder with a demonic ferocity. Still, that should at least slow the damn sword down a little bit. A moment later Naruto dodged the kunai by hair's breadth, followed by the massive weapon that came around faster than ever. Shino came to the rescue with a massive spear of bugs that clashed against the blunt side of the sword and gave Naruto time to put some space between him and Zabuza. Kami, the guy, should have been slower, or more reserved. He was wounded after all, but instead the guy just got more enraged. A cage bunshin tackled Zabuza from behind, but he elbowed it in the face, then chopped another two in half, and kicked another in the face. Naruto, my Kikai have drained as much chakra as we could from this man, Shino said, moving to stand beside him, his voice strained and his shoulder sagging. Perhaps now would be a good time to retreat. Can't, Naruto panted, trying to blink be out of his eye, he'll just come after us. I gotta finish this here and now, I already got one psychopathic sword user after me. Naruto was only vaguely aware of Shino retreating, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered other than the simple fact that Naruto had finally decided to kill his enemy. He even had a plan, and it was amazing how simple everything became when he focused entirely on killing his enemy. In unison the various cage bunshin disappeared and Zabuza turned to stare him down. A moment of understanding seemed to pass between them. No more games, no more dancing around it. It was time to get down the serious business of killing each other. Zabuza spun his sword quickly and drove it into the ground, his fingers beginning to form a rapid and long string of hand seals. Naruto gathered as much chakra as he could, and formed a Tora seal. Suten, Suiruden no Jutsu. Zabuza shouted, the air around him rippling before the moisture exploded and joined into a massive column of water in the form of a dragon hurling at him. Futon, Daitopper. Naruto roared, the now dry wind before swirling with a near-splitting roar as it clashed against the other technique. The clash of techniques raged for a moment before the wind tore through the water dragon, forcing Zabuza to use his sword as an anchor. Still the man and weapon slid several feet, leaving a deep gouge in the earth. It was hardly over, as Zabuza yanked his sword free and spun it before bringing it down, the air rippling before a spiraling blast of water shot out once more. Naruto met this too with his wind, using the Kei's no Yaiba. As the two techniques clashed, decimating much of the surrounding area, Zabuza shot forward. Naruto quickly created another Kei's no Yaiba, which Zabuza defended against by using his sword as a shield, which resulted in little more than the sword being deeply several times. It was not enough, however, to deter the man who reached Naruto in a matter of seconds, his sword coming around swiftly. Naruto dodged back, a second too slow, his arm receiving an ugly see from the tip of the blade. Swearing, Naruto preformed a shunshin backward and skidded to a halt, glaring at his attacker. Producing a kunai in each hand, Naruto shot forward with a series of shunshins attacking from every direction. Metal rang against metal as Zabuza defended against his until Naruto found his opening and using the heavy style, ducked at his head and came up on the inside of the man's guard. A kunai to the ribs, too shallow to K, Naruto planted a foot against the man's leg and jumped backward into the air, avoiding the retaliation. Twisting, Naruto came around, sending not only the last kunai he was holding, but the one strapped to his forearm heading for the man. They were deflected deftly with the massive sword, but that was fine. Landing with a flip, Naruto sprang away, and then rebounded from a tree, charging back at the man. Zabuza spun his weapon overhead, then brought it down sharply before him and charged as well. They met halfway between them. Zabuza made his thrust and Naruto using the heavy dodged, attacking from his left side with a jumping punch to the face. It connected but only as a glancing blow and Naruto had to grab the man's head with his hand and hurl himself over. Landing he shot away with a shunshin and pivoted, turning to face the man. Despite appearances, this guy was freaking strong and he could take some serious damage. Naruto could too, of course. His arm was burning slightly, but he knew without looking that the sea was healing rapidly. Then he noticed that the man was resting his massive sword across his shoulders, staring at him in a way that did not bode well in Naruto's opinion. That was when Naruto looked down to discover his jacket was almost completely ruined. Apparently, he had been slightly off in his dodging of that weapon. The entire right side of his jacket was now gutted. That wasn't what got him though. The orange material was darker than it should have been, which meant that Naruto was nothing life-threatening, for him at least, but Naruto would have sworn he had dodged that weapon completely. Looking back up, he narrowed his eyes on his opponent, who started laughing in a tone that sent a chill even up Naruto's spine. Fury overtook him though and he clenched his fists, knuckles popping loudly in the air. "What the hell are you laughing at, you freak?" "Nothing," Zabuza said snidely, the sword coming around to point at Naruto steadily. "It's just that you seem to have a bloodline like Haku. It's been a long time since I've had to fight a bloodline, so I'm laughing for not seeing it sooner." "Hey," Naruto said while silently preparing to attack at the first opportunity, "I'm Uzumaki Naruto, the future Hokage, not a bloodline. You can worry about being Hokage after you survive," Zabuza said before disappearing from view in a blur of speed. Naruto felt his instincts scream at him and he dropped to the ground as the massive sword overhead from behind him. Using his hands, Naruto spun over, planting a kick firmly to the man's shin and then, performing a backflip, another to his chin. Landing smoothly, Naruto surged his chakra and leaped back as the massive blade swung around at a speed that was near invisible. Zabuza was on the offensive once more, and before long Naruto was doing his damnedest to avoid getting any more see. Still, no matter how much he hurt this eyebrow-less freak, it didn't slow him down. Naruto was also aware that their height and weight made a difference as well. Naruto's blows were just a tad lighter than they should be because of it. If he had been fighting anyone remotely near his own height, he should have been able to do much more serious damage. That kick to the shin, he knew, would have laid out Kiba, but with Zabuza, it was little more than a tickle apparently. Sidestepping a particularly brutal downward chop, Naruto prepared to launch a counterattack only to catch a front kick to the solar plexus, which drove the air out of his lungs and launched him backwards. Luckily, Anko had hit him there before several times, so he learned quickly how to focus through the air and lack of air. Hence, instead of being a helpless target, he rolled with the momentum when he hit the ground and sprang to his feet, his breath already returning in sharp S. Zabuza thankfully was caught up trying to avoid a sudden massive wave of bugs. Naruto felt a flash of annoyance toward Shino for interfering, but instead took the time to begin forming his Rasengan. One hand to supply the chakra, the other rapidly striking it to give it form, and then looking up he fixed his gaze on his enemy who was turning to face him. Naruto let a low growl escape as he started forward in a stumbling, but run, bringing his arm with the Rasengan back, his concentration at its zenith. Zabuza waited until Naruto was within range and then twirled his massive sword overhead, before bringing it down in a vicious and powerful downward chop. It was a feat that Naruto was not conscious of doing, but suddenly, realizing he could not move fast enough to avoid the blow, he performed a shunshin to reach inside the man's guard before he could complete the motion. Zabuza's eyes went wide. Naruto appeared in a crouch, snarling as he drove his Rasengan forward into the swordsman's sternum. The air filled with the sound of rushing wind, cracking bones and then a meaty tearing, besplattered Naruto's face as the man lifted off his feet, sword falling uselessly aside, and was sent hurtling 50 feet away into a massive tree that snapped from the impact. Zabuza's body arched from the blow, the man stood erect for a moment and then collapsed lifelessly face first to the ground. Naruto slowly stood up from the crouch, arm falling absently to his side. Taking a deep breath, he let it out and turned to find Shino approaching cautiously, and it took Naruto a moment to force his beer aside and offer a faint smile to the boy. "I didn't need your help." "That was," Shino started, uncertain, then shook his head. "Kekio-chan acted on her own. She says that she thought it best to help you out since we are all on the same team." Naruto managed a grunt said, not knowing really what to make of that. He knew that Keiko was a bug that Shino spoke with a lot, it was just something that came up among them, but this was the first time he'd heard of her having an actual personality. Well, he did suppose that if she could talk then she would have to have a personality but still. Well, thanks Kekio-chan. She says you are welcome, Shino said in that monotone way of his. Oi, so what did you think of that move? I can't wait to tell Ero Sennin that I used it to take down an A-rank missing nin. Naruto gloated, leading the way to the S-body where he began searching for items. It was impressive, Shino admitted, the amount of concentration had to be very high. I am also impressed that you managed to use a shunshin in conjuncture with such a move. However, you seem far too carefree after such a battle. Whatever, Naruto muttered, pocketing the money on the man along with a few notes and one sealed scroll. Then after some deliberation, he took the scratched forehead protector. We should move to locate Ino and then return to Otafukugai, Shino said, by now Tsunade-sama will have spent all of our money and be preparing to leave soon. Right, Naruto said looking at the body before creating several kage bunshin. Naruto. Even an eyebrowless freak deserves to be buried, Naruto muttered and then walked over to the massive sword, considering it. The blade had survived the Kase no Yaiba, yes there were deep sea on the outer edges, but for the most part it was untouched. Kneeling he produced a sealing scroll that he had left over from training with Ero Sennin along with his pen and the chakra-laced ink. A few deft movements later to mark both the scroll and weapon, and Naruto was ready. Channeling the chakra into his hand, he placed it on the scroll activating the seal. Unyu Fuan Huan. There was a pulse as the seals on the scroll and the sword glowed, then with a gentle glow, the sealing was complete and Naruto was binding the scroll carrying the sword shut. Standing he pocketed it and grinned at Shino, now let's go met up with Ino-chan. Tsunade frowned, dropping her coins into the machine and yanking the arm. The Sannin watched the wheels spin for a moment, then looked around the parlor. It was well lit, giving the decor a nice warm look, complementing the polished wooden panels and the strikingly colorful paintings on the wall. The place was new, or at least it was new since the last time Tsunade had been through town, and packed. Large, brightly painted machines lined every available surface along with small tables and the room was crammed with people at the machines, shouting in victory, cursing in defeat, and employing odd body language in an attempt to win. It was the kind of place that not too long ago, Tsunade would have enjoyed even if she did lose the shirt off her back, which had happened only once, when she had foolishly agreed to play S-poker with Jiraiya and Orochimaru when they were younger. Now though, she found it rather boring and the medic wasn't sure why. It could have been the lack of Shizune, or Tonton, maybe it was because she was now responsible for taking care of people and didn't have the energy to be selfish. Most likely, it was because she was still held the necklace and the guilt associated with it. She hadn't been able to confront Naruto, she had been surrounded with kage bunshin all day after all. Nicely created and very convincing kage bunshin of Shino, Ino and Naruto, but Tsunade was a Sannin. She wasn't sure why Naruto would do such a thing, even to avoid her it seemed stupid to replace all of them and the only thing she could figure was they were training. Looking back at her machine she sighed, another loser. She checked the kage bunshin had given her, for the chance to apologize for messing up, she found it gone. Just as well, the beautiful woman decided, they needed to get on the road and head to Crater City and then get back to Konoha. Getting up she started for the entrance, only to pause at the sound of someone hitting the jackpot. Eye twitching she turned to find some wrinkly old hag sitting at her machine, money pouring out into the tray. Her first instinct was to explode and take the money, but she restrained herself seeing the old hag share a K with an equally wrinkled old bastard. Snorting in annoyance, the legendary sucker left cursing her continued bad luck. Sometimes she really did believe that if wasn't for her bad luck, she wouldn't have any luck at all. The sun made her squint, she had spent too much time indoors gambling, but she kept walking back toward the inn. The kage bunshin had promised to wait there for her, since they didn't want to ruin her fun. Tsunade figured that way the real Team 10 could change with their counterparts quickly, hopefully without letting her know they had ever been gone. The only reason she had allowed the fast to keep going, besides blowing all of their money gambling, was the fact that she kept expecting that boy from last night and his partner to come after her. The longer those three were out of her way, the easier things would be for her to deal with when the fight happened. Sadly, Neither had shown up all day and she had decided to gamble while waiting. Clearing the gambling district, she turned left and headed down the road to her inn. The people of this city had truly been ingenious in the layout. The gambling district and the pleasure district surrounded the inns and normal shopping area. Tsunade could remember Ino's reaction when they had wandered from the weapons shop and into the pleasure area. It had been priceless to see the girl's face turn bright red and her eyes to grow as big as saucers. Shino hadn't reacted, which had made Tsunade wonder if maybe he wasn't gay. Then she considered the fact that there had been enough F for both male and female to enjoy, so she considered the possibility that he just wasn't interested in S. The most obvious answer, though, was that he was an aberrame and hence showed very little reaction to much of anything, including attractive women offering him good times for discounted rates. Reaching the inn, Tsunade paused, finding the three ninja already waiting for her. Naruto's hair had reddish tinge to it, his jacket almost in tatters. Ino stood nearby, her top darkened around a tiny hole near her C, but there was no mistaking her confident look. Only Shino appeared no different. Approaching the three, wondering what had happened because there was no way any of that was from a training session. "Hey Barber," Naruto said, his voice bright as he held up a scratched mist forehead protector, Momoki Zabuza. A rank missing nin. Demon of the Mist. Member of the Kiri no Shinobugatana Nananan Shu. S. Tsunade blinked, then as the full knowledge of what he was telling her sank in, she felt her eyes widen. These three, had K. Zabuza. The Demon of the Mist. No way, no F way, but the evidence seemed to support the story and she could only stare at them in silence before recovering. "What? Are you expecting a parade?" "No," Naruto said, ignoring her biting sarcasm as he put the forehead protector up, "just letting you know." "Whatever," Tsunade mumbled, then staring at him for another moment tossed the necklace at him. He caught it, of course, startled, and then his eyes darkened slightly. "What are you?" "Shut up and listen," Tsunade said curtly, "see him off, I'm over 50 years old. I've survived 2 wars, lost friends and family, some because of my own mistakes. I'm not going to change my opinion about heroes or Hokages." "Oba-san," Ino started to object, before Tsunade held a finger up to silence her. "However," Tsunade said, her gaze not wavering from Naruto's, "that necklace doesn't belong to me. Not anymore. It's a curse you inherited from the previous Hokages and 2 heroes. For better or worse, it's yours." "Huh?" Naruto asked blankly. "All of them," Tsunade said, her tone growing sad, "were just like you. That's why that cursed necklace belongs to you now, why it's your curse. When you it goes with you." Tsunade saw the understanding in his gaze, the appreciation, and she snorted, pushing past them silently. The others followed, and suddenly Tsunade wished she had more money and a few more hours to K in the gambling district. "Yeaaaah! Ramen!" Naruto cheered as they came within sight of the village gates. Ino smiled slightly, but otherwise ignored her teammate, much as Shino did. Tsunade pinched the bridge of her nose and shouted for him to shut the hell up. "Oi! Why don't you shut up, Barber?" Naruto countered, looking at her with a bright smile, the necklace she had given him around his N. "What did you call me?" Tsunade grated out, left eye twitching. "Sorry," Naruto said mockingly, "I forgot how old you were. I called you Barber." "Runt," Tsunade shouted back, SA fist into the ground where he had been standing a split second before, "I'm going to K you." "Nuyuaha," Naruto taunted, while Ino and Shino sighed off to the side, before nearly being turned into a pincushion from a hail of kunai. Naruto. Whipping around, the bee drained from his face as he spotted the fearsome woman known as Anko. "Hey Anko," Naruto gulped, eyes widening. "We need to have a little talk," Anko said sweetly, twirling a kunai around a finger, "about you making this village think I would run around shouting that I love people." It was just a joke," Naruto said, edging away from her. "A joke?" Anko asked sweetly, too sweetly, to be safe. "You had a clone of me make out with Kurenai in public." Quote. Naruto suddenly bolted amid a hail of sharp weapons, the insane woman known as Anko chasing after him. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.